You're listening to Uptown Radio. It's February 2nd. I'm Augusta Anthony.
And I'm Juan Torres Falcón. The White House has approved the release of a controversial memo from the House Intelligence Committee. Previously classified, the memo accused the FBI of abusing government surveillance during the Russia investigation.
The Nunes memo is designed to create an environment where an independent Mueller investigation is impossible.
This week, a new investigation has shown that half of New York school cafeterias have dirty kitchens. What does that mean for kids?
There are all kinds of violations, dead roaches and mice droppings and these kind of violations.
It's Groundhog Day, and Punxsutawney Phil says to batten down for 6 more weeks of winter. New York's own meteorological rodent, a marmot named Chuck, disagrees.
Let's be very clear. Who's the number one groundhog in America? Staten Island Chuck! Right, guys? Staten Island Chuck.
All that and more on Uptown Radio. First, the news.
From Columbia Radio News in New York, I'm Dan Rabb. Riders will not have to rely on cash to buy their Metro cards this weekend. The MTA announced yesterday that they're delaying a system-wide software update that would have prevented customers from paying with credit and debit cards. The agency says the delay will give them time to shorten potential outages and address customer concerns. More contraband is being seized in New York prisons than ever before. The State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision says that the incidents involving smuggled drugs and weapons have more than doubled over the past decade. State officials say the increase is the result of better detection efforts, but the union representing the state's prison workers says that urgent measures are needed to protect corrections officers. An employee of New York's Port Authority is alleging that the agency secretly recorded medical examinations of over 8,000 employees. In a lawsuit filed yesterday in Manhattan Federal Court, Charlene Tallarico says the agency routinely kept surveillance footage of physical examinations that took place on agency property. Tallarico is seeking unspecified damages in the suit. The Port Authority declined to comment. The Oyster Creek nuclear power plant in New Jersey will shut down more than a year ahead of schedule. State regulators had demanded the site be closed by 2019, but the plant's operators now say the facility will be closed as soon as this fall. Oyster Creek's parent company says the plant's 500 employees will be offered jobs elsewhere in the company. The New Jersey power station opened in 1969, making it the oldest active nuclear plant in the United States. Environmentalists are calling the closure long overdue. A meeting over proposed bike lanes caused tempers to flare last night in Manhattan. Community Board 5 was expected to vote on a measure to approve new bike lanes on 26th and 29th Streets, but the vote was delayed after heated arguments between advocates for the lanes and local residents who are angry about the loss of parking spaces. Residents such as Joseph Smith argued that new bike lanes will contribute to traffic congestion in Manhattan.
New York is a war between vehicles and pedestrians. There's no room for bicycles.
A new date for the board's vote has not been announced. The murder trial of NYPD Sergeant Hugh Berry continues this afternoon in the Bronx. The 9-year police veteran is accused of fatally shooting 66-year-old Deborah Danner while on duty in 2016. Prosecutors say Berry ignored police protocols and provoked Danner, who suffered from schizophrenia. Berry's lawyers say their client was acting in self-defense. New Yorkers should expect sunny skies tomorrow with highs in the low 30s. On Super Bowl Sunday, expect rain with temperatures reaching into the mid-40s. It's currently 25 degrees in Manhattan. This is Dan Rabb, Columbia Radio News.
This is Uptown Radio. I'm Augusta Anthony.
And I'm Juan Torres Falcón. The Nunes memo is out. Named after its author, the Republican congressman, it accuses the FBI of abuses of power. To understand what this could mean for the Russia investigation, my co-host, Augusta Anthony, spoke to Timothy Naftali, a presidential historian and specialist in the intelligence services.
So, Professor Naftali, thank you so much for being here with us today. So after Republicans called for the memo to be released, President Trump had a window of opportunity to withhold it for national security reasons. The White House has just declassified the memo. So what do you think?
This is a very dangerous moment in that we see the independence of the FBI under assault from two branches of government, both the executive branch and the legislative branch. My concern is that this will be an attempt to muddy the waters and to undermine the credibility of the congressional investigation of the 2016 election, which hasn't gone very far, and of the Mueller investigation, more importantly.
So what does this mean for the Russia investigation? What could happen?
What it means will depend on the American people. In a properly functioning constitutional republic, the investigation will proceed. The concern I have, and I'm not alone, of course, many people have this concern, is that the Nunes memo is designed to create an environment where an independent Mueller investigation is impossible. I am concerned that the president is laying the ground for not just attacking the Mueller investigation, but undermining it severely.
And so has this ever happened before where there's a public conflict between the president and different elements of the intelligence community who are supposed to be bipartisan?
Oh, there have been disagreements. In the 1950s, President Eisenhower was not happy with military intelligence analysts who were arguing that the United States was far behind the Soviet Union in the development of nuclear missiles. So, of course, presidents in the intelligence community have disagreed. But it's one thing to disagree respectfully. It's another to actually try to undermine the institution of your opponent. The issue here is whether the executive branch will allow an independent investigation of itself. In the Nixon era, Nixon publicly said, of course, he'll allow this investigation to proceed, and then tried to undermine it. And when he couldn't undermine it, he then fired the special prosecutor, Archibald Cox. So this question has been raised before in our history. In the 1970s, the answer was yes. Despite what the president wants or feels he needs, an independent executive investigation can occur. We're now raising the same question again. The president is laying the foundation, with the help of House Republicans, to make changes in the Justice Department and in the FBI. And he is going to try to whip up enough support among the American people to cover what would clearly be a self-serving decision. He'll make the argument that it's for the sake of, the United States and for the sake of an unbiased probe. But by the nature of his actions, it appears that he's doing this because he's afraid of an independent probe. So that, I think, would be a political crisis. Now, I didn't say constitutional crisis because the House Republicans are working with him. It's not Congress versus the president. It's a part of Congress with the president.
Okay. Professor Naftali, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Immigration activists in New York City have a message for Senator Chuck Schumer. Don't compromise on the DACA bill, even if it means shutting down the government again. And as Uptown Radio's Elisa Escarce reports, they're delivering the message in person.
Carlos Calzadilla Palacio has a letter for Schumer. He's standing on the sidewalk outside the senator's office in Midtown Manhattan, reading it to a small crowd of protesters.
We call for, under your leadership, a pledge to be absolutely uncompromising in terms of negotiations.
Calzadilla Palacio leads the New York chapter of the Young Progressives of America, a youth activism organization. He says he was disappointed when Democrats agreed to reopen the government without a firm agreement on DACA.
They had all the leverage while the shutdown was happening. Could have said, no, we are not voting on a spending bill until we protect these dreamers, and that's something that we're demanding Chuck Schumer do right now.
As next Thursday's deadline for a final budget vote approaches, Calzadilla Palacio says he hopes Schumer will hold a harder line on immigration.
I believe he let us down once, and we want to remind him that I hope he doesn't let us down again. We want to make sure that he understands that the base is with this policy. The majority of the American people want to protect these dreamers.
Calzadilla Palacio says young progressive voters will keep Schumer's actions in mind as the midterm elections approach. Stephen Legomsky teaches immigration law at Washington University in St. Louis, and he's former chief counsel to the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service. He agrees the immigration deal could impact Democrats in the next round of congressional elections, when many hope to pick up seats.
If the Democrats fail to get Congress to pass the DREAM Act, they would suffer serious electoral losses in many congressional districts and possibly whole states.
But Legomsky says the Democrats will likely have to compromise.
I don't think it's realistic to expect the DREAM Act to pass without funding for some type of border wall.
Back at the rally, Calcedia Palacio is preparing to deliver his letter to Schumer. He says the stakes are high for the senator.
I think a lot of people will lose confidence in his leadership. I think the Democratic Party will lose confidence in his leadership, and the base will lose confidence in his leadership.
Whatever Schumer decides to push for, the president is pushing him to act. In a tweet last night, he said the senator will have to get moving fast or he will, quote, disappoint you again. For Uptown Radio, I'm Elisa Escarce.
We're at the Juilliard School, and I'm playing Schubert Sonata D959 in A major, and this is the first movement of it. It's a piece that I always like. It's Schubert's monologue. He's a hesitant person, and you can hear it from his music. Like, oh, am I gonna do this? Probably not. Am I gonna do that? Oh, probably not. Probably that. You know, sometimes you can hear it, and it's really fun. Before I came to Juilliard, I would just play notes. I learned how to make it more like an artwork, not just a handcraft.
That was Juilliard student Ayn Ran Chin.
Mayor Bill de Blasio presented a preliminary budget yesterday of $89 billion. That's a major spending increase of $3 billion for this fiscal year. Reporter Mira Gable has more on the details.
Because the city has seen a massive growth in revenue from property taxes, de Blasio has some extra cash. But his proposed budget included very little room for new projects. It also completely dodged allocating funds for the city's deteriorating subway system. Who is responsible for funding the MTA has become a hostile battleground between Governor Andrew Cuomo and the mayor. De Blasio said during a press conference yesterday that the responsibility resides in Albany. The mayor also said the city may lose $1.5 billion in dollars from the federal and state governments, hitting the city with cuts to welfare services, special education, and public hospitals. Carol Kellerman of the nonpartisan Citizens Budget Commission has called it a wait-and-see budget. She also says de Blasio must limit his spending habits, which have increased nearly 20% since he became mayor in 2014. The mayor will head to Albany on Monday, along with other city mayors, to pitch state legislators for additional funding.
The good news in Albany is we have a chance to fight back. I think there's a real chance to go and stop some of those cuts.
How the city will fill anticipated gaps from federal and state government cuts will loom until then. Mira Gable, Columbia Radio News.
Lunches served by New York City's public schools may be making students sick. According to a new report from the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism, mice, roaches, and flies have been found in nearly half of school cafeterias. Investigators reported more than 1,000 serious violations across hundreds of schools. Paulina Siniawa first broke the story. My co-host, Juan Torres Falcon, asked her what's been going wrong.
Schools are supposed to keep our children safe. What is happening?
A very good question. Well, according to our investigation, there are a lot of violations, health violations happening in the cafeterias, and the records from last 5 years shows that there hasn't been much reduce in those numbers.
Investigators found these violations across 700 schools. What are the violations they found?
There are all kinds of violations. Some are less critical, but there are also a lot of these critical violations can lead to foodborne illnesses. So among those, there are dead roaches and mice droppings and these kind of violations.
And how many students are getting sick?
That is really difficult to say because the foodborne illnesses are quite difficult to track and they are not often reported. So it's really impossible to say like a number of kids getting sick.
Did you find that students are avoiding eating in schools? Were any of the violations apparent to them?
Well, of course, students always say the school food is bad. That happens everywhere. But it's also that there is something more than just like the lack of taste, they didn't like the taste. It's because there have been all these discussions about moldy pizza and dead roaches and undercooked chicken. So they were avoiding the food also because of that.
We'd like to thank Borina Siniauer from the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Kumo! My name is Yumi Heflin. I'm walking my dog in Morningside Park. Yeah, that's Kumo. We just moved to New York like a month ago. Go play. Hey. Yes. He's not really used to the city. It's more like lake and mountains, and he's not really used to walking on the leash all the time, but he's doing great. I think I find it harder than he does. Just the pace and the new noise, the city, the lights, everything. Hi. Well, he thinks he's a human, so he'll just love about anything human does, taking baths, asking for cuddles, playing all the time. He's 9 years old, but he just behaves like a puppy. And singing. Yeah. Definitely a lot of singing.
Today's the day we turn to rodents to predict the weather. It's Groundhog Day. At events across the country, they crawl out of their winter homes to tell us when spring is coming. As Cassiana McClanahan finds, while Pennsylvania's Punxsutawney Phil may be the most famous groundhog, New York is grooming a formidable rival on Staten Island.
You might have heard about a certain Pennsylvania weather forecaster.
Weather prophet, Punxsutawney Phil.
Punxsutawney Phil. Punxsutawney Phil.
But New York has its own famous rodent, Staten Island Chuck. Staten Island's district attorney, Michael McMahon, is quick to point out, our groundhog is better than yours.
Let's be very clear. Who's the number one groundhog in America? Staten Island Chuck. Right, guys? Staten Island Chuck.
Staten Island's groundhog draws crowds. At today's event at Chuck's home at the Staten Island Zoo, there are beauty queens, woodchuck enthusiasts in full body costume, and many excited kids, including Joey Moore.
I'm going to see Chuck's shadow. That means spring is coming.
While Joey and his sister stand looking at Chuck's empty enclosure, politicians crowd the platform. Deputy Borough President Ed Burke emcees the event, giving a speech laden with groundhog humor.
Who is Chuck's favorite rock star?
Cher.
No. Bruce Springsteen.
For many years, the mayor headlined this Groundhog Day ceremony, but he's not among the public figures squeezed onto the podium today. The mayor's absence came after a series of woodchuck disasters. In 2009, Staten Island Chuck bit Mayor Michael Bloomberg. Next year, the zoo substituted Chuck for his more docile partner, Charlotte, but during the ceremony in 2014, she leapt out of Mayor Bill de Blasio's arms and died a few days later from acute internal injuries. The zoo said it was unrelated to the mayor's bungle, but still. Burke and other organizers decided to rethink the ceremony format.
It became clear that we wanted to have Chuck in his own habitat where nobody had to pick him up. And that's what we created. It's the world's first Chuckavator.
This morning at the appointed time, this contraption lifts Chuck into a plexiglass enclosure next to the stage full of elected officials. Scott Stringer, the city comptroller, does the honors.
The power that you vested in me, I am now ready to give the determination. Are you guys ready?
Yeah. We see a small brown bunch of fur curled into a ball, and after a few seconds of encouragement from the crowd, Chuck begins to sniff and waddle around. Soon, his attendants report his verdict.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Spring is coming!
At least, that's what Chuck says. This morning in Pennsylvania, his rival, Punxsutawney Phil, saw his shadow, predicting another 6 weeks of winter. Historically, Chuck has been the more accurate marmot, correctly predicting the coming of spring with nearly 80% accuracy. And Punxsutawney Phil, less than half.
There's the Empire State Building, the Statue of Liberty, the Staten Island Ferry, and Chuck.
For Uptown Radio, I'm Cassiana McClanahan.
For Columbia Radio News in New York, I'm Wendy Rhodes. President Trump cleared the way today for the release of a controversial memo. Republicans believe the memo proves that federal law enforcement officials abused their authority in seeking court permission to surveil a former Trump campaign advisor. Democrats charge that the memo is being used as a diversion. California Democrat Adam Schiff told CBS News that releasing the memo takes attention away from investigation into the collusion between the Trump administration and Russia during the 2016 elections.
It's a tremendous disservice to the American people who are going to be misled by this, by the selective use of classified information.
In economic news, it's a record. The U.S. added 200,000 jobs in January. That's 88 consecutive months of job growth. Wages rose by an average of 9 cents per hour, due in part to increases in the minimum wage. While the official unemployment rate came in at 4.1%, a broader view of unemployment indicates an effective rate of 8.2%, the highest since September. The 8.2% unemployment rate includes part-time workers looking for full-time work and discouraged workers, those who are able to work but not actively seeking employment, and those who are willing to work but have given up their job search. 90 people are presumed dead after a boat smuggling Pakistani migrants sank in the Mediterranean. The boat was found capsized today on the most traveled route for migrants, Libya to Italy. 35 other migrants drowned on Sunday, bringing the January death toll to at least 246. The Philadelphia Eagles will take on the New England Patriots in Minnesota this Sunday in Super Bowl 52. With 2 days to go, the Patriots are favored by 5 points. A stronger-than-expected jobs report sent the Dow tumbling 600 points today as interest rates hit a 4-year high. The Dow finished its worst week in 2 years, closing out at 25,520. Your ride home tonight is looking pretty good, with no commuter alerts issued at this time. Headed out of town, it's smooth sailing through Newark, JFK, and LaGuardia. If you're planning to stay in New York this weekend, get ready to bundle up. Temperatures are expected to drop to 15 degrees tonight, with a high tomorrow of 34. This is Wendy Rhodes, Columbia Radio News.
Well, that does it for this edition of Uptown Radio. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Our foreman today was executive producer Madeline Thompson. Leading our staff of reporters was senior producer Sarah Wyman.
Director Bo Hamby coordinated our studio production with Colin Marston and Jennifer Siegel.
Our web team, Mira Gable and Julia Chepkiru, got this stream live to the web. Editor Stevie Hertz and assistant editor Eileen Grench led our copy team.
Veteran radio professionals Sally Herships, Deb Amos, Gilda DeCarli, and Ben Shapiro advised our staff, with support from Kerry Donahue. I'm Augusta Anthony.
And I'm Juan Torres Falcon. Uptown Radio is live on Fridays at 4. Until next time, you can always find us on uptownradio.org. From all of us here at Uptown Radio, thanks for listening.